Remembrance Day, lest we forget. It's a time to remember the many sacrifices paid by our soldiers to allow us to enjoy the freedoms we have today. It's also a time to review how our society and government treats our veterans and their families. Now, joining us now to discuss this is Wayne King, a retired Canadian Forces colonel and service officer for the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion. Wayne, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much.
Now, when did you first enlist in the armed forces, and what really motivated you to get involved?
Well, I enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1959. A different era, a different world at that time. My initial motivation, I must admit, was not necessarily for the broader reasons, but I was very, very interested in flying, and particularly the then modern aircraft, things like Spitfires, Mustangs, aircraft like that. But the world has changed a great deal since that time.
Did you ever become Top Gun? Like reference to that movie?
No, I never did. I initially, after I spent some time training, and then my first operational tour was with Air Defense Command, flying what was a very modern aircraft then, the CF-101 Voodoo. And I flew those in Bagotville, Quebec for a number of years.
Where are some of the other places you got to serve over the years, Wayne?
Pretty much all across Canada, except on each coast. Although I spent time on each coast for various operational requirements, it was mostly in Canada until the early 1970s, and I had a tour in the United States, Charleston Air Force Base, South Carolina, where the mission was strategic transport on a worldwide mission. So while I was serving there, I spent many hours, days, weeks, both in the Middle East as well as South and North America, the Far East, pretty much all over the world, and then returned to Canada.
Let's talk a bit about that relationship between the Canadian and U.S. military and how far back it goes and how important it is to this day.
Well, it is extremely important, not only in terms of our membership and participation in NATO, but extremely important for the Canadian military, in that we, as a consequence, have access to an awful lot of experience, knowledge, capability within the United States military structure that tends to multiply or strengthen the effect and the contribution that Canada makes to world peace.
Wayne, war is never pleasant, but many people believe that it's often necessary to really fight for our freedoms. What are your thoughts right now on the ongoing war in Ukraine? And how about the war between Israel and Hamas right now in Gaza?
Those two situations, although separate locations in the structure, both in the Middle East, but they are linked in many subtle ways. The Ukrainian war is one which I certainly hope is resolved successfully in terms of expelling Russia from Ukraine and allowing Ukraine to resume its status as an independent, free, and democratic nation within the world structure. There is no reason, in my view, why Russia decided to invade and take over a good portion of the Ukraine territory. They may have had some squabbles, but that doesn't mean that they have the liberty and the right to assume ownership and sovereigns over what is an independent nation. My difficulty with the Russian invasion is that unless it is stopped in a very decisive and internationally supported manner, any political temporary halt to the war will only represent a short-term pause, allowing the Russian military and nation to rearm, restructure, reorganize, and come again. whenever they feel strong enough to do it. It's time to get the situation resolved and resolved in a positive, long-lasting manner. Whether this will happen, I don't know. As far as the Hamas versus Israeli situation, this whole thing has been a proxy war from other Middle Eastern nations. And certainly when Israel is attacked by, in an unknown manner, unforecast, unwarranted manner, they have every right to defend themselves. And there is, I think, the onus on the international community, whether through the UN or other national organizations, to seek a permanent and long-lasting solution. Israel deserves to be a sovereign, independent nation. The average citizen within the Gaza Strip and so on are not, in my knowledge and experience, a warlike group. They are hostage to the situation, and I certainly feel that they're being punished for the sins of other nations, and it's something that only through decisive international action it can be resolved in a good manner.
So, Wayne, what was your reaction like? I want to circle back to Ukraine for just a moment here. When that former Ukrainian officer who fought for the Nazis in the Second World War, I believe his name was Yaroslav Hunka, was honored in the House of Commons. Everybody stood up, gave him a standing ovation. That many people didn't even realize he was a former Nazi. What was your reaction like when you found out that our Canadian politicians were doing that?
Well, my reaction, like many, many Canadians, was that it represented a very dark blot on our international image. To recognize and celebrate an individual in our parliament who had that kind of a background, that kind of a linkage with the group that we fought a World War II over, is one which gave me a great deal of concern, and I think a majority of Canadians felt that it was something that never should have happened. Why this situation was not properly vetted in the first case, I don't know. I'm not a politician. I don't know how the ins and outs, the day-to-day activities occur, but clearly the ball was dropped, and very, very badly dropped.
So, Wayne, let's talk about the poppy for just a moment. It means so much to so many people, but what does it mean for you as a veteran?
The poppy is now an internationally recognized symbol of our recognition, our acknowledgement of the sacrifice that many of our veterans have made throughout the ages, dating back many, many years before Canada was a nation, in fact. And it represents the sacrifice of so many to preserve and enable us as individual Canadians to enjoy the freedoms and the benefits that we are able to do so. So many in the world right now, whether they're reduced to a status of poverty and in refugee camps or under the gun in some situations like the average citizens in Ukraine, they don't enjoy the kind of freedoms that we have. And I think that those who adhere to the use of the poppy or the recognition of the poppy should, at the very least, whether they wish to support the actual military activities of the nation, if they accept and wear a poppy, then they are at least recognizing the contribution of so many veterans to our society.
So, when people buy a poppy, Wayne, to support our veterans, where does the money go?
Well, to begin with, that's a bit of a misnomer. We don't sell poppies. The Legion has never sold a poppy in the throughout the duration of its existence. The poppies are available for free, really. They're presented to the General Society through poppy boxes distributed throughout the community. So any thought that you buy a poppy is a bit of a misnomer. Certainly, we gratefully receive any contribution, any donation that individual citizens may wish to make to the support of veterans. And those funds are initially placed in trust at the various branches throughout the country, and then used to support veterans where there is financial need, where there is assistance that can be provided that society otherwise doesn't necessarily have available. But we don't sell poppies, but we certainly encourage all citizens to wear the poppy during the Remembrance Day period.
Yeah, and let's make donations to support our veterans and their families.
Yes.
So, Wayne,
Yeah.
where and when will the Remembrance Day service be held in Lethbridge, and what can people really expect when they attend?
There are two locations that Remembrance Day ceremonies can be observed. First of all, in the new facilities out at the exhibition grounds. This is the first year that the celebration or the Remembrance Day ceremony will be held in that building. And we would ask any who wish to attend to be in place by 10:40 in the morning. And there we will have a temporary cenotaph set up and bring on some of the representative groups within our community, the youth, of course, and then led by other groups like police, fire, veterans themselves, and other associated groups. The second ceremony will be at the cenotaph adjacent to City Hall. And both ceremonies will be keyed to focus on the armistice declared at 11 a.m. on the 11th of November in 1918. The ceremony at City Hall or at the cenotaph will be highlighted by a bit of a fly past by one of our local citizens who has the privilege of owning and flying a World War II trainer aircraft, the Harvard, that was collectively known as the Yellow Peril, and a very challenging aircraft to learn to fly and to master, but it will be present and will fly past hopefully right at 11 o'clock. Unfortunately, we will not see the C-17 aircraft. It's rather all the aircraft available to Canada, all 5 of them, are either in long-term maintenance or deployed on international support for our military overseas.
Wayne, the Canadian military recently issued a directive that instructs chaplains to remove any religious symbols from their uniforms to ensure that any prayers be inclusive during any official public events. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts would be just personal thoughts in regard to that. I have always held and continue to do so that Canada is a Christian nation. And I feel it is extremely important that we continue that legacy. I recognize that Christianity is not the only religion in the world, and individuals have the right to practice their own religion. And I don't object to that, nor do I suggest that it should be otherwise. But again, I can only express my own personal opinion. And that is that Canada, being what I feel is a Christian nation, should follow that particular objective.
Now, Wayne, officials with the Canadian Armed Forces say there's a real shortage of personnel, and they're having a real hard time getting new recruits. Why do you think that is?
A variety of reasons, I believe. First of all, Canada, unfortunately, is not a nation that overtly supports the existence and employment of the military. I believe that in the main, they do so because of international pressure, not because they think it's necessarily the right and proper thing to do in support of democratic societies around the world. At a time when we continue to operate with equipment which is 50 plus years old, equipment that in truth belongs more in the museum than it does on a modern battlefield, any young individual who might be contemplating a career in the military, seeing that, I think quite rightly can gain the impression that the country as a whole really has no particular objective to support the military and to support those in uniform. And at a time when we struggle to see the kind of support for our veterans coming through the government, again, it's a bit of a difficult sell to the youth of our society to say that, yeah, this is something that is worthwhile pursuing.
Wayne King is a retired Canadian Forces colonel and surface officer for the Royal Canadian Legion here in Lethbridge. Wayne, thanks so much for your service and for your time today.
You're welcome.